kalt in, and welcome to Pandora. With the release of Avatar: The Way of Water now a few days behind us, I thought it was a good time to start talking about what happened in the film. Please be aware this video will contain full spoilers for the film's plot and characters. If you want to see my non-spoiler thoughts on the film, be sure to check out my previous video on the channel. For me, the opening of the film was amazing, and the first sign that this was going to be something special. The first few shots were very similar to the first film, giving me a sense of familiarity and making it feel like no time had passed at all between these releases. Seeing the familiar sights of the Hallelujah Mountains was wonderful, and then seeing the montage of Jake and Neytiri's family growing just added to that sense of wonder. I loved how the film spent time introducing the audience to all its new members and showing to an extent where they all came from. As someone who's read High Ground, it was lovely to see the series referenced here. The first shot in which we see Spider as a child reminded me of a panel from the series, and it was nice to see someone who resembled Makorska in the background. Even though we had seen the shot before, it was wonderful to see Netayem's birth and the ceremony to accept him as the next leader of the Omaticaya. Kiri's origins were also touched on in this opening, and there are so many questions that have come out of this film in relation to the character. Sigourney Weaver's performance was amazing and really got across how similar Kiri is to her mother. Yes, you heard that right, the opening of the film confirmed that Kiri is the biological daughter of Grace's avatar. Somehow after Grace's death, her avatar gave birth to Kiri. There are so many questions that we could ask in relation to how this works and who is the father and how Eywa is connected to this birth, but I feel I'll need a whole video in itself to break this all down. It was fun to see both Spider and Loak teasing Kiri in the opening about who her father could be, as I imagine this will be an ongoing mystery throughout the sequels. The opening of the film ends with the RDA's return to Pandora, and it's wonderful to see this scene directly taken, almost shot to shot, from the first volume of High Ground. Everything from Jake and Neytiri's date night to seeing the new star in the sky was taken from the comic series. I was jumping out of my seat with excitement at seeing this brought over so faithfully, although given how High Ground was based on the original script, it could have been the other way round. Either way, it was wonderful to see the fleet de-accelerating into orbit, and was the first sign that this was going to be a beautiful looking film. I love how the RDA have learnt their lessons from the last time, and create a blast zone for the landing on the surface before the deployment of troops. It makes sense that they would try to clear as much of the natural world around them beforehand, as they've seen firsthand how the natural environment of the planet can be used against them through the use of Eywa. It's also fun to see how the events of the RDA's return are framed in the film. We know from High Ground that it's several days after they first see the star in the sky that the RDA finally arrive in orbit. A lot happens in that gap that the series shows, and no doubt after as well. The film having a 1-year time jump at the start gives High Ground and other stories in the future time to fill in this blank. I really hope we are able to see this year in some form in the future. The time skip also gives the film a great opportunity to show what has changed in that time. It's wonderful to see how Jake has taken the Omaticaya and turned most of the clan into a guerrilla warfare unit. Seeing them hide in the Hallelujah Mountains just shows how overwhelmed they are. It's a running thread throughout this theme, but it seems that the Na'vi are on the other side of the conflict, being on the back foot for the runtime of the film, and is a really unique way to approach the story. We know that there are still several ISVs in orbit despite the events of High Ground, and there is nothing stopping them from using the same scorch and burn tactics that are shown during the opening. Even by the end of the film, the RDA still hold the upper hand for now, and will probably throughout the sequels. It's a really fun place for the status quo to be moving forward, and I also love how the clan's base of operations is called High Camp. It could just be a coincidence, but it's a nice nod to Jake's stance on getting the high ground in the aforementioned comic series. The raid on the train was a great way to introduce the brotherly bond that Loak and Netayem share. Both Britton Dalton and Jamie Flatters did an amazing job at getting across this love-hate bond the two have. I love how Netayem was always the one trying to stop Loak from getting into danger and doing something stupid. We see it a lot throughout the film, and it's enhanced by both actors' performances. It's these rash decisions and constant berating by Jake that leads to certain moments later in the film. I really love both of them as characters, and I wish we could have seen more of them together, like in the first scene. It's also nice to see how quickly the RDA respond to their raid on the train, and just shows how big of a presence they truly have on the moon after just a year. It's also interesting to see Jake continue to ignore the free laws of Eywa in favour for more firepower against the RDA. Perhaps this could lead to his connection to Eywa becoming more distant as the sequels go on. We certainly don't see him interact with her nearly as much as in the first film. Perhaps she has turned her back on him, as one of the characters suggests throughout the film. It's nice to see Jake having to deal with being a father and falling back on his military training and way of life to deal with his children. Throughout the film, Jake is very closed off from them emotionally, and it's only really at the end when he suffers a loss does he truly start to see his children, especially Loak, for who they really are. Again, the development that Jake goes through in this film was wonderful to see, and shows just how much he's still struggling with his Na'vi life, even a decade later. It was really nice to see more of Norm and Max still helping the clan with their raids and supplies. It's nice to see that not all of the humans who remained behind chose to side with the RDA when they returned. I really wish Norm had had a lot more screen time in this film, as he was one of the few characters who didn't really have an overarching story or development. I'm hoping he can appear more in further sequels, especially as we've now established most of the new characters to the franchise. Moving on, let's talk about clone Miles Quaritch. The scene in which he awakens was my favourite in this opening act. It was wonderful to see how he struggles to adapt to his new life as an avatar. It's also brilliant to see more details on how he was able to come back. We knew before the film that his memories were implanted into an avatar, but what we didn't know was that they were taken from him right before the assault on the Tree of Souls, and stored in a memory device that was shipped back to Earth. There for the past 10 years, an avatar body has been growing for this moment. It was also really nice to see a cameo from Parker in the recording, and I'm hoping we can see Giovanni Ribisi again in the sequels, especially if we ever go to Earth. It means that this Quaritch isn't the original, and is more of a clone than the resurrection, a theme the film plays with a lot. Stephen Lang really does an outstanding performance as this new version of the character, and brings Miles' old mannerisms and attitudes back, while giving him a new layer of adaptation and understanding to the character. I also really love seeing Lyle back as another member of the Recon Squad. It's nice to see him return to support Miles, and I believe he will be another presence in the sequels going forward, as we clearly see him survive in the final battle. Their tour of Bridgehead and the introduction of Frances Ardmore was brilliantly executed. It's nice to see how she treats them more as a weapon to be used in this conflict than as people. We get more confirmation of the scale of Bridgehead's production facilities, and how much Jake's raids are affecting the construction of the complex. On a side note, I had said in a previous video that I didn't think Bridgehead would be dealt with in this film, and it's really nice to see that this will be the overarching threat on the moon that the Na'vi will eventually have to deal with. I also really enjoyed that while Awa is remaining outside of the conflict for the most part, any ship that the RDA sends into the Hallelujah Mountains is quickly destroyed as the planet's immune response steps in. I assume this is Awa's way of ensuring that the conflict doesn't grow any further than it already has. Moving on, it was nice to see Kiri, Loak, Netayam, Spider, and Tutiri have an adventure to themselves. It really helped to develop their bonds to each other, and showed us more of their individual personalities. I love seeing how Spider is seen as a brother to them all, despite his background, and how him and Kiri have such a strong bond. Jack Champion, who plays Spider, did an outstanding performance in the film, showing the character's conflicted loyalties as they are tested in the story. It was nice to see that he didn't just fall on one side of the conflict, as many of us had believed he might, but remained in this grey area for the runtime of the film. I also loved Trinity Bliss's performance of Tutiri. It felt she brought a sense of innocence and wonder to the role that the character would have for being so young and trying to understand all the events going on around her. She really helped to make her character more believable on screen. It was nice to see them return to the site of the assault on the Tree of Souls and learn that it's forbidden to go there by Jake. No doubt a lot of bad memories and dangers still await them in what's left. This all leads us to the first true fight of the film, and their first interaction with Miles. I love how he's easily able to recognise that they're Jake's children, and is quite shocked at seeing the original Quaritch's death on the recording. Seeing that sense of hate in him grow for Natiri out of revenge was powerful to see. I also love his first interactions with Spider, believing that he had returned to Earth after his mother's death. This is where it's revealed that Spider was Miles Quaritch's biological son, and every character already seems to know this as well by this point. It's something that I was a little shocked by, but could be explained in the rest of High Ground. Either way, seeing the love that this version of Miles has for Spider was surprising to say the least, but very welcomed. It's a bond that grows between the two of them throughout the film, and is what leads Spider to saving him at the end. It was a wonderful element of the film to see, and I really can't wait to see how this bond between them will grow in the sequels, but also threatens Spider's relationship with Jake's family. The fight scene that ensues as Jake and Natiri rescue their family is a brutal one to say the least. Jake's killing of several of the Recon with an axe was quite visceral for the franchise, and set a similar theme throughout the rest of the film. Every close combat fight in the film was beautifully shot and choreographed. Everything was clear to see and made sense in the situation. I really do like how it was Natiri who let Spider be captured, instead choosing to focus on her own family than trying to save him, despite Kiri's pleas. It shows that Spider and Natiri's relationship hasn't improved since High Ground, and it doesn't seem to get any better throughout this film. I could see all of this coming to a head in the following sequels, especially if they find out it was Spider that helped Quaritch's clone to live. We then get to see the fallout of all this, and how leaving the Omatakaya is creating a divide between Jake and Netiri. It's something that takes a long while for the film to mend, but it's nice to see how the conflict is affecting both of them. Zoe Saldana's performance throughout the film is wonderful, and really shows how much Netiri cares for her family, and still wants to defend her home despite being outmatched. Her resolve throughout the film is wonderful to see, and it's only when the worst happens at the end of the story that we see a vulnerable side to the character. Again, Zoe Saldana and Sam Worthington's performances are easily some of the standout of this film. It was nice to see Tarsem set up as the new Olo Ektan of the Omatakaya, and how Jake had to ceremonially die for this to happen. It was another powerful moment and really showed how much the family was leaving behind. It also showed how much the clan had come to respect and care for Jake in the past decade, as many were visibly grieving for their departure. I really hope that we're able to see the Omatakaya again in the sequels, although I do feel the focus won't be back on them for a long time as we explore other areas of the moon. I love seeing their journey through Pandora's seas and how treacherous the flight is. It was nice to see a sense of the length of the journey and how exhausting it is for them all. The film was able to show this perfectly, and I really hope we're able to get official names for each of their Ikran at some point, as I really want to know what they're all called. I also love our introduction to the Metkaina, and seeing how isolated they are from the rest of the clans. It makes sense why the clan has not worried about the threat of humanity, and how this is only brought to their doorstep when Jake and his family arrives. I also like the mentions of the other ocean clans during this section. While I can't remember the names they used, I'm hoping that the visual dictionary will enlighten us upon this area of the world, as it's always good to see more of Pandora fleshed out. On the Metkaina themselves, I absolutely loved everything about the clan. For me, they are my favourite in the franchise, and I love their customs and traditions, and how their whole society is based around the water and the life within. I love their connection to the Tolkun, and how each member of the clan has a brother and sister Tolkun that they share their life with every time they come back from migration. I love the look and feel of their settlement. The main village of the clan was so imaginative, yet took so many real-world influences from Polynesian culture that it was successfully able to blend the two perfectly. I love how the film introduced us to the clan and the Sully's first meeting with them. For me, Tonowari was one of the standout characters in the film. Cliff Curtis did an amazing job at portraying this firm but kind-hearted leader of the clan, who, while being the strong imposing figurehead, was much more down to earth and willing to listen than first appeared. On the other hand, Ronald, played beautifully by Kate Winslet, was the tough decision maker of the two and the backbone of their leadership. She was much more strong-willed and determined than I thought she would be, but it paired so well with the more relaxed Tonowari. Together, these two characters and actors made me love the clan a whole lot more, and I really hope we get to see both characters again in the sequels. Talking of introductions, I love seeing the family having to adapt to life within the clan. It was really nice to see how they struggled with the basics, but eventually learned to master them and start to feel more like members. I really enjoyed the relationship that formed between Loak and Soraya. I feel that Soraya was the emotional heart of the children's story, and her portrayal by Bailey Bass played into this beautifully. I love how she was chosen to guide Loak and the other kids in showing the clan's ways, just as Netiri was chosen to show Jake in the first film. Both were against the idea, and it makes me believe even more that she and Loak will become the two main characters of the franchise as the sequels continue. I could easily see time skips occurring in which they have their own family. Talking of family, this theme throughout the film was ever present, and nothing showed that more than the Tolkuns. Seeing how Loak was saved by Payakan, and how the two were able to bond over them being outcasts was wonderful. I loved learning and discovering how the Tolkuns worked, and how intelligent they were. It's still a little crazy for me that they can write songs and other complex behaviours, but I love it, and it goes to show how creative James Cameron has made Pandora. I love seeing how Payakan was an outsider because he took a stand against the poachers, and how the Metkaina reacted to Loak's bonding with him. It's the only time in the film that Tonowari's more fierce side is shown, and it was quite impressive to see. Talking of the Tolkun, it was wonderful to see all the new and varied sea life on Pandora. Seeing the oceans of the moon alive with so many vibrant and unique creatures really added to the immersion of the world. The standout for me was the Ilu. Their playful attitudes and caring demeanours remind me of a real-life dolphin. I loved seeing the Sully kids each learning to ride their own, and how it came more naturally to some than others. In contrast, I love seeing how Jake's stubbornness was also a barrier for him learning to tame a skimwing. He eventually overcame this, but it also shows how human he still very much is. This leads me onto the topic of Anum, Tonowari's son. Again, like Soraya, he was also against the idea of helping the Sully kids, but instead of trying to help them, saw them all as outsiders and freaks, even going so far as nearly getting Loak killed by an Akula. While I really liked his small development in the film of accepting Loak as a brother and not a rival after he stood up for him, I really wish we'd have seen more of the character. Don't get me wrong, Philip Gelger was amazing in the role and really brought the character to life. I just wish he could have had more to do, especially in the latter half of the film. During the attack of the poacher's ship, he really didn't play as big of a role as I thought he would do in the story. On the topic of the poachers, it was nice to learn more about how the RDA are funding this whole operation on the moon, and how these poaching vessels are the backbone of that operation. If there was ever a more blatant parallel to our real-world poachers, then this was it. As I said in my initial review, the themes of protecting the ocean were strong throughout the film, and they were the strongest when you got to see how the poachers operate. You could have taken that scene and placed it on Earth in our world and it would have fit. I like seeing how the sequels are platforms for showing the destruction that these type of activities are doing to our oceans. I hope someone watching this film could feel inspired to try and make a change in our real world because of these scenes. While the scenes of the Tulkuns being hunted were horrific, they did emphasise the lengths at which the RDA are going to in order to get what they want from the moon. All of this destruction of the Tulkun just for a substance that stops aging in humans from the brain juices of the creature. While the de-aging substance is a massive thing for the universe, humanity haven't learned anything in the past decade about the balance of the ecosystem. I still don't know how I feel about the de-aging substance. It feels like it could be a very important going forward in the sequels, as it could be the last hope for those still living on Earth, but I also feel it could be another unobtainium, which was just a plot device in the first film and nothing much else. The captain of the ship, Mick Scoresby, and his science advisor Ian Garvin, played by Brendan Cowell and Jermaine Clement, respectively, were fun characters to have on the other side of the moral spectrum, doing whatever it takes to get paid and not thinking about the consequences of their actions. They weren't in this for the larger goals of the RDA or the conflict it had brought, but just wanted to get their next quota in on time. They're quite unique characters for the franchise, not having greater plans or ambitions above those what they know. I did like how Ian was able to see the damage they were doing and felt shame for their actions, but instead of actively doing anything to stop it, was just content in drowning out his sorrows and thoughts in drink. Again, we haven't really seen many characters like this, and I hope we can see them again. While Scoresby did seem to die in the final battle after losing his arm, I do think we could see his return, and the same for Ian, who we never saw his fate. I also love how Scoresby's lack of care for the larger conflict around them also continued to Quaritch taking over his ship. You could feel Scoresby's resentment for taking orders from Quaritch. Ultimately, this led to disaster, but I would have loved to have seen what would have happened if he had stood up against Quaritch. Quickly going back into the story slightly, and talking of Quaritch, it was nice to see him and the other recoms try to get into the mindset of Jake and the Na'vi by taming an Ikran and trying to learn the language. Hearing Quaritch talking Na'vi took some getting used to, but really worked with his character development, and leads me to think that he could become more of an anti-hero in the future of the sequels. Maybe by the end of the saga he could even fully embrace the Na'vi way of life, and side with them. I certainly got the feeling that his mindset was changed slightly by the end of this film. I also feel sorry for his Ikran, as that was a brutal way to tame him. Hopefully we will learn his name sometime in the future. This brutality also continued to the scene in which they were interrogating Spider. It seems Ardmore has no qualms about subjecting a child to torture. It shows just how ruthless she is, and I really think the sequels will build her up to be much more of an imposing threat. I also like seeing how Quaritch's consciousness got the better of him during this, and it really goes to show how much he comes to care for Spider throughout this film, seeing him as his own son by the end of it. Despite this bond, he's still able to threaten an entire village of Metcaina and nearly kill an unarmed woman on the spot. He has a long way to go before he can be redeemed as a character, if that's the route they will take him down, but that whole burning of the village scene was very intense. I feel sorry for Spider during it, as he was forced to watch everything happen but powerless to do anything about it. I do wonder if this will come back to haunt him in the future. No doubt some of those villagers will want to seek some sort of revenge. The last big scene I want to talk about before moving into the final section of the film is with Kiri. Seeing the Metcaina's version of the Tree of Souls was wonderful, and again goes to show how creative and diverse Pandora is. Kiri's experience when connecting to it was amazing and heartbreaking. Seeing her reaction to see Grace again and how it affected her after was shocking to say the least. I was in tears when they met in the link, and then instantly worried for Kiri after her seizure. It was such a powerful moment for the character, and really affected her for the rest of the film. There are so many questions around Kiri, but why was she taken out of the connection after Grace's face turned to that of horror? And why can she hear the heartbeat of Awa? We now know she can control life around her as the film makes abundant, but what does this all mean going forward? Again, this whole topic needs a video in its own, which I'll be making soon. With everything set up, we move into the final act of the film, and wow, what an act it was. I haven't talked much about the fight scenes in the film so far, but this is where they were shown off to the fullest extent. The battle against the poacher's ship and the Metcaina was stunning. Everything from seeing Skimwings being used to dodge incoming fire, to seeing how Quaritch was able to use his Ikran to the advantage in the skies was wonderful. I love seeing how intense the chase through the water was as the Sully kids were being hunted by the human forces. I love seeing the tense standoff between Quaritch and Jake, with the former threatening his captured children. I love seeing how quickly that escalated into a full-on fight, and how the ocean helped the Metcaina to get the upper hand. It was also nice to see Payakan help in this, and hopefully redeem himself in the eyes of his fellow Tolkien. I also loved how Spider helped from the inside, ensuring the ultimate destruction of the ship, and slightly redeeming him for his earlier inaction. Everything about the opening of this act was amazing, and I loved every second. It was even nice to see karma being handed out to Scoresby, who paid the price with his arm. While overall the scale of the conflict in this film was far smaller, it worked better because of that, and gave us a lot more personal stakes in the fight for each of the characters. Every element of the battle was intense and led up to the most shocking and emotional moment of the entire film. The death of Netayem was a powerful and striking moment, and one that took me by surprise. For a long while, a lot of people in the community have been speculating that this would happen, but I was always against the idea, not thinking that they would kill off a new character so quickly. I was incredibly wrong, but I'm glad I was. His death was impactful and hard to watch. It was heartbreaking to see everyone's reactions to it, especially Neytiri's. It was shocking, but also was built up to. It didn't come out of nowhere, and really helped to give the character a closure despite how new they were. I haven't talked much about Netayem up until this point, because I didn't think he had much in the way of an overarching development in the story, but ultimately his death was the culmination of this. It helped to unify the rest of the family and see each other for who they were. It's really a shame that we didn't get to spend more time with Netayem before his death, but I'm hoping that we get more stories set beforehand that can help with this. It was a powerful moment to have in the closing of a film, and handled with care in all aspects. Its effect on Jake and Neytiri also was not to be underestimated. Their fury at the humans still left on the ship was brutal to watch, and really showed how they were dealing with the loss. It allowed us to see a side of them that we haven't really seen, and led to one of the best and most personal fights of the entire film. I really do believe they made the right decision here with killing off Netayem, as the repercussions of this will be felt throughout the rest of the saga, and will affect every character moving forward. The final showdown between Jake and Quaritch was wonderful to see. It had been a long time coming, and the build up to it was brilliantly handled. It was so personal, with knives and fists being used as opposed to weapons. It was in stark contrast to their fight in the first film, and I loved it because of that. I love how it was spurred on by Jake knowing that Quaritch would always hunt them and never stop, to the point where Jake's own life becomes in danger in order to stop the threat once and for all. I love how the mixture of grief and anger took him to this point, but I also love how it's his children who bring him back from this, both physically by getting him out of the sinking vessel alive, but also mentally by making him see what he has around him in his family. The final fight and their escape from the ship is a powerful moment and ends with a heartfelt reunion for the family. I did think that Neytiri was about to be saved by Spider and not Kiri, as a way of starting to mend their relationship, but I'm glad he went with saving Quaritch. It shows that despite everything he's done, Spider still cares about him, and may even hold out some hope for him to change. Although this will certainly come back to bite him, as leaving the Quaritch clone alive will only lead to more pain going forward in the sequels. Plus it also puts Spider in a terrible place, as I don't think Jake or Neytiri would easily forgive him if they found out what he's done. Only time will tell how badly this will affect everything for the family, but it's not going to be good either way. Ending the film with Netayem's funeral, and the scene in which they see him within Eywa, was a bold move for Cameron, but one that I think really paid off. Seeing the whole of the Metcaina coming to show their respects to Jake and his family showed just how far they had come to becoming one of the clan, and seeing them be accepted into it by Tonowari only enforced this. Seeing the true meaning of the song chord that had been shown throughout this as being for Netayem was another impactful moment, and seeing it being sung by Zoe Saldana was amazing. If you haven't had a chance, please go and check out the song on its own, as it's beautiful and perfectly captures how Neytiri is feeling for the loss of her child. I was welling up at the last scene in which they got to see Netayem within Eywa, as it was a heartfelt and emotional send-off for the character. It really goes to show how much care and love James Cameron and all the writers of the film have for these characters. It also helped to show how strong of a bond the family still has, and how far they will now go to defend their home. It makes Jake's last line in the film about standing and fighting a much more meaningful and impactful one. It's a fantastic way to end the film, and one I don't think they could have done any different. I'm sure there is a lot that I've missed when it comes to the story and characters, but I'll be talking about all of this a lot more over the coming weeks and months, so if I have, let me know and I can make smaller videos talking about these individual topics. Overall, I loved everything new that was added to the universe in this film. I love where all of the characters ended up at the end of the story, and how they will be affected by the story going forward into the sequels. I'm really excited to see where it will all go from here, and what the other sequels will have in store for each character. I can't wait to dive deeper into all of the areas I talked about today, and I can't wait to hear all of your thoughts on everything in the film. I can't wait to see where the franchise will go next, and what's in store for the universe. But what did you think of everything new that we were shown in the film? What was your favourite scenes or moments, and where do you think the franchise will be heading next? I can't wait to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. But until then, hej alvaj, give me.